There are some dates in history that just change everything, and September 11th, 2001 is absolutely one of them. It was a day that didn't just alter skylines, it redrew the map of our modern world in ways we still feel every single day. I mean, for anyone who lived through it, it was just this raw collective trauma. The shock, the confusion, it was all broadcast live, right into our living rooms. The world just stopped and watched as the unthinkable happened. It was a moment of absolute vulnerability. So you might be thinking, okay, that was a historical event, it happened a long time ago, but its legacy is woven into the fabric of your life right now, from how you get on a plane to your basic rights to privacy. In this explainer, we're going to connect the dots from that day straight to your life today.
To really get the impact, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to a morning that felt just like any other.
It was a picture-perfect September morning, crystal clear skies, 4 planes take off from the East Coast, all headed for California. On board, you have passengers, flight attendants. Nobody has any idea that a few men among them are about to turn these ordinary airplanes into weapons. What happened next was just this rapid-fire, terrifying chain of events. And it all played out in less than 2 hours. Let's just walk through that timeline. Okay, so at 8:46 a.m., boom, the first plane hits the North Tower. And at first, news reporters, people on the street, they're all thinking, oh my God, it must have been a horrible accident. But then, just 17 minutes later, a second plane slams into the South Tower. And that is the moment the world realized. This is a deliberate attack. Then, at 9:37, a third plane hits the Pentagon, the heart of the U.S. military. A little before 10 a.m., the South Tower just collapses. And then, less than 30 minutes after that, the North Tower does the same. And all while this is happening, there was a fourth plane. So there was one more incredible, heroic story playing out in the sky. On Flight 93, passengers were able to make calls to their families, and they found out what was happening in New York and D.C. They knew their plane was next, so they made a choice. They decided to fight back. Their struggle forced that plane down into a field in Pennsylvania. They almost certainly saved the U.S. Capitol, or maybe even the White House, from being hit. The human cost of that single morning is it's staggering. When you add up all 4 sites, New York, the Pentagon, and that field in Pennsylvania, nearly 3,000 people lost their lives. Thousands and thousands more were injured. So who was behind this? Well, the attacks were planned and carried out by the terrorist group al-Qaeda, which was led by Osama bin Laden. Now, bin Laden actually denied it at first, but in 2004 he came out and publicly took responsibility. The official 9/11 Commission report later identified a man named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the guy who was the principal architect of the whole plot. In the days and weeks that followed, the country was just gripped by this mix of grief, anger, and a whole lot of fear. And that fear would directly lead to some of the biggest changes to American law and society we've ever seen. Just 6 weeks. Think about that. Only 6 weeks after the attacks, the U.S. Congress rushed through this massive bill called the Patriot Act. It was passed so quickly, so overwhelmingly, that a lot of politicians later admitted they didn't even get a chance to read the whole thing. This single law completely redrew the line between national security and your personal freedom.
So what did this thing actually do? Well, in a nutshell, it gave the government these incredible, sweeping new powers to spy on its own people. We're talking secret access to your phone records, your library records, what books you check out, your personal documents, all of it in the name of fighting terrorism. It also made it a lot harder for the courts to keep an eye on what the government was doing.
And for years, we didn't really know the full scale of this. That is, until 2013, when a whistleblower named Edward Snowden revealed just how far it had gone. We learned the NSA was secretly collecting the phone records of millions and millions of Americans every single day. And that program was a direct legacy of the powers granted by the Patriot Act. Now, all this stuff isn't just some abstract political debate. These changes had very real, tangible effects on our daily lives. And the most obvious place you see it, the place you feel it every time you travel, is the airport. It's almost hard to believe now, but before 9/11, you could literally show up 20, maybe 30 minutes before your flight. Security was basically just a simple metal detector. But after 9/11, everything we know today, the full body scanners, taking off your shoes, the strict limits on liquids, those reinforced cockpit doors, every single bit of that is a direct result of the attacks.
But the changes weren't just about procedures and convenience. They were social. And tragically, they turned violent. Just look at these numbers. In the year 2000, there were 28 reported hate crimes against Muslims in the U.S. In 2001, after the attacks, that number just exploded to 481. A wave of xenophobia swept the country, and it didn't just target Muslims. It targeted Sikhs, or really anyone who was perceived to be from the Middle East or South Asia.
And those numbers aren't just statistics. They're people. People like Balbir Singh Sodhi. He was a Sikh man, so he wore a turban and a beard as part of his faith. On September 15th, just 4 days after the attacks, he was outside his gas station in Arizona planting flowers when a man shot and killed him, simply because of how he looked.
And this brings us to the final and maybe the most profound consequence of 9/11, this international cycle of violence and retaliation that, honestly, is still playing out today.
Okay, so check out this tragic irony. Osama bin Laden said the attacks were revenge for U.S. interference in the Middle East, right? That was the reason. But what was the actual result? The war on terror. The U.S. invaded not one, but 2 countries, Afghanistan and Iraq. It led to decades of more U.S. military presence in the exact same region.
You know, there's that old saying, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And it just perfectly sums up the destructive logic that took over. Al-Qaeda attacked the U.S. for revenge. The U.S. then invaded 2 countries for revenge. And for all the innocent families who were killed in those wars, well, their desire for revenge can create a whole new generation of extremists. And what this really shows is a dangerous truth. Violence creates a downward spiral. It just feeds on itself. Killing one extremist can create 10 more who want to take their place. It's a cycle fueled by anger and grief, and it has no logical end. And so that leaves us with one last thing to think about. The legacy of 9/11 shows that when fear is what drives our decisions, the consequences are huge and they last a long, long time. And they're paid not just by soldiers on a battlefield, but by regular citizens through the loss of privacy, the rise of hatred, and a world that seems trapped in this endless cycle of retaliation. The price really is paid by all of us.